One of the things we talked about, in the campaign was that I wanted to reestablish cooperation with the Talbot County Narcotics Task Force, the state-run task force. I was lucky in that last year's county council provided the former sheriff with 2 additional deputies. I took those positions, and they now serve full-time in the Talbot County Narcotics Task Force after about an 8 or 9 year absence. Those deputies are working alongside state troopers, Easton police officers, in cooperation with Easton Police, St. Michael's officers, and the other jurisdictions, Trapp and Oxford, and they're working hard on the heroin problem and the overall illegal drug problem. So what the public gains from this cooperation is that now all of the drug information, crime information that comes into my office, that comes into the state police barracks, that comes into Easton Police and Trapp Police and Oxford Police and St. Michael's Police, it all has a venue, if you will, for that information to be shared. So every day I'm seeing emails from Easton, St. Michael's, Oxford, State Police going to the task force, CCing the rest of us on it about drug information. Same with my office. We now have people sitting in the same room in a bullpen from different departments. So my road deputies have a connection to the drug task force. They pick up the phone, they call, or I call or send an email to our people in the task force saying, hey, we just got this information. Mm-hmm. Instantly that information is then brought in front of the troopers that are there, the other police officers that participate in the task force. So if all the agencies, and it is working now, where all those agencies are providing information to the task force, mm-hmm. we're not in competition with one another. Mm-hmm. Police have been notorious in the past for being, and I'm not saying here, but across the state, for being in competition at times. I mean, it's just human nature. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So when they're working together, the information's coming. I mean, it's a win-win for the citizens. And as important is our jigsaw puzzle of the opiate epidemic and the heroin business that's going on in our county. We're getting more and more pieces of the puzzle. What I've done since I've been in office is I try to meet with a heroin addict every week. And because I want to understand this. This isn't the crack cocaine days of the late 80s and 90s. It's a much different drug. It's a much different distribution network. It's a much different addiction.
Back to distribution. Why is it different? You would think that the business model would apply to all, so to speak.
Well, I think the business model almost applies to all, but what we're finding here on the Midshore is that we have young people addicted to heroin who are pooling their money, and 1 or 2 will go across the bridge, go to Delaware, to Seaford or Annapolis or Baltimore or Philly, and they'll bring back 50, 100 servings of heroin, and they're distributing it to their friends, and typically a lot of them are heroin addicted. When the old crack cocaine days, when I was working in Salisbury as an undercover officer, you could interview addicts, and a lot of the addicts could tell you who the big profiteer was in Wicomico County. So you literally could have 3 or 4 targets of the people that were doing kilos, who were actually bringing kilos into Wicomico County. We're not seeing that with heroin on the Midshore. That's happening in the bigger jurisdictions. Obviously, Baltimore is the #1 heroin addicted city in the country. So those huge distribution rings are there, mm-hmm. but we haven't seen that larger scale half-kilo size dealers showing up in Talbot County. There are people in this county that are not addicted, that are just profiting. There's no doubt, and we're going about it, identifying them. But it's a different model right now than the crack cocaine days, because what I look at it is the substance abuse issue is like a wheel, and my office and law enforcement is one spoke in that wheel. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that my spoke was working. The spoke here was working properly. I'm going to fix my spoke. Mm-hmm. We have addictions, Department of Juvenile Services, the schools. I think everybody has to look at their spoke in the wheel. Parents, grandparents, they have to look at their spoke in the wheel and say, what can I do to fix my spoke in the wheel? Am I doing everything I can to make this work? Because, you know, it's the health department, it's our medical doctors, it's everybody, it's basically everybody that every living person in this community is a spoke in this addictions wheel. For instance, getting back to these heroin addicts that I've met with, some of these kids I coached over the years, whether it was in youth leagues or lacrosse or as older, and they sit down and they're very open with me. And the model is this for Talbot County. The typical model is this. They start drinking at a young age, in middle school age, and they're experimenting with marijuana in middle school, early high school. They're using marijuana heavily and more heavily in high school. Then somebody introduces them to pills, to the opiate-based pills, Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet. They start abusing pills. Most of the time, and the real message is they're getting them from their parents and their grandparents out of their medicine cabinets, or their friends' parents or grandparents. These kids are getting into these pills, and they're getting addicted to the pills. Once the pills run out and they can't get them more, I mean, the pills on the street are $20 to $30. You can get a bundle of heroin, a serving of heroin for $10. So as the pills start to run out, they're all opioid-based pills. So that's what heroin is. Yeah. And I'm not a medical doctor, but it's basically heroin in a pill. To you know,
the way we're looking at it, yeah.
The way I'm looking at it. So then they graduate to heroin. So there's 1,200. There's 1,200 kids at Easton High School. I'm guessing there's 400 at St. Peter's. So and between St. Peter and Paul and St. Michael's High School, I'm guessing you have about 1,700. So rounded up to 2,000 high school students in Talbot County. 8% of that would be 160 kids.
Yeah, and so,
and even if that number's not accurate, even if it's only half of that,
yeah, right.
If 80 high school kids have tried heroin. The addicts that I've met with them over coffee, I've taken them to lunch. They're all in some stage of recovery now, whether it's just a few months or a year or more. Yeah. They don't know of any of their friends that tried heroin that weren't addicted.
So we got.
So you're talking about 60, 80,
yeah.
80, 100 addicts,
yeah.
You know, if we're making 100 addicts a year. I mean, there's far too few kids and parents taking the early intervention seriously. And this is what I mean by that. Sometimes parents believe that drinking at underage drinking or experimental use of marijuana is a rite of passage or something like that. Well, this isn't the marijuana of 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. This isn't the marijuana of 15 years ago. This marijuana is so much more potent. It's not the stuff that they used to grow out in the farm fields, you know, 30 years ago.
THC levels.
The THC levels through the roof. The availability, you know, of it is it's much more available today. I mean, just the technology we have with texting and all the connections these kids have. I mean, we know kids in our community that have gotten it through the mail from California and Oregon and Nevada, and you know, just being shipped. We didn't have that availability when we were kids. We didn't know anybody in another part of the country. Yeah. So the message to parents is that this isn't a rite of passage. You know, they didn't have. I don't know that they had Oxycontin or Percocet when I was a kid. I mean, we certainly never heard of it. But you know, there's a process that these people get to heroin, and they're getting there by 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And as parents, we need to take it seriously. Yeah. And when we suspect our child's involved in early early drinking, yeah. Marijuana experimentation, go to the health department, yeah. Get help, get evaluated, let's find out how serious it is, yeah. And intervene early, because we've seen in our community the devastation it causes.